Across the state of Arizona, hundreds of people paying their respects to the victims of Saturday's shooting.
We need more than one ambulance. There's more than one person down.
The 911 calls give you a real taste of the madness.
The guy had a semi-automatic pistol. He went in, he just started firing, and then he ran.
Even the operators are losing their composure.
Is anybody injured? Did you say Gabrielle Gifford was hit? She's hit. Okay. He's breathing. There's multiple people shot. Okay. Oh my God.
One caller, a man named Manuel Hernandez, explains that he's trying to provide information while helping the wounded.
Like I said, shot. Okay. You okay, sir? We got help coming.
And this caller, Sally Badger, desperately searching for her husband, Bill.
My husband just called me and told me he was shot. He went to the Gabrielle Gifford's, whatever thing we're going today, and I don't know where he is.
Your husband was shot?
That's what he said, he just called.
Okay.
And then the phone went dead.
Police have not given a possible motive for these mass killings, but the Pima County Sheriff Clarence Dupnick did place some blame. He suggested in his word, and I'm quoting him now, vitriol, that's a direct quote, in politics and the media, inflaming the American public to dangerous levels. This was extraordinary, what we heard from this sheriff in Pima County.
In any way speculating on the motive and bringing in the political vitriol in your work?
Not in any way, shape, or form, but the anger that's purposely generated by people who make a living off of it serves one particular party better than the other. It wouldn't surprise me if it continues at least through 2012.
I regret that you just made it so political in a way, Sheriff, but I also say, and I think that I'll hear negative vibes from the vast majority of my audience tonight, that since this kid was obviously conscious of this Congresswoman going back to his encounter with her in 2007, that people who suggest the climate that existed around her re-election campaign and some of the other things that were going on are in denial to suggest that those events are irrelevant.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
From North Korea to Iran to Iraq to Afghanistan, and you look at how things have changed, how Americans are viewed overseas, if that is important to you. Do you have any moments of doubt that we fought the wrong war? That there's something wrong with the perception of America overseas?
Well, those are two different questions. Did we fight the wrong war? Naturally, I have no doubt. These people are trying to shake the will of the Iraqi citizens, and they want us to leave. That's what they want us to do. And I think the world would be better off if we did leave. If we left, the world would be worse. The world is better off with us not leaving. It's a mistake to pull out.
Another American that was born in Waterloo, Iowa, was John Wayne. But what I want them to know is, just like John Wayne was from Waterloo, Iowa, that's the kind of spirit that I have too.
That's not a small deal, that's a big deal.
So is being Iowa born. And in an interview outside the modest home where she lived until 12 years old, the Minnesota Congresswoman emphasized her Iowa values.
But what I want them to know is just like John Wayne was from Waterloo, Iowa, that's the kind of spirit that I have too.
While John Wayne's parents lived briefly in Waterloo, the late actor was born in Winterset, Iowa, 150 miles away, and never did. John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, lived in Waterloo. While critics have focused on her occasional gaffes, fans see passion and toughness.
Even when he was asked about the odor from the crawl space, Gacy had an explanation.
You know, I found it as odd when we bought the house that a house with a crawl space would need a sump pump. But then I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there, and then the crawl space actually floods up to a foot deep in water. And then as it recedes, it puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
As for the day in December 1978, when a police detective thought he smelled decaying bodies, Gacy said it wasn't that at all.
We had come into the house, and my little Lhasa Apso was in the house. And of course, he had been locked in the kitchen, you know, all day. Well, the little puppy, he piddles, see, and while he's piddling, and while he is doing his business on the paper and that, you can imagine what it smells like if you go into a closed room. And when the heat came on.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
Still today, it seems inconceivable that Gacy would rely on such a defense. Because the truth about the crawl space became international news on the very day Gacy was arrested. On the night of December 21st, 1978, while John Gacy was held at the Des Plaines police station for possession of marijuana, the second search of his house began. While some officers looked for evidence upstairs, two went below into the crawl space. Moving on hands and knees, the evidence technicians surveyed the muddy ground. One officer took a shovel, dug down about 6 inches, and pulled up something hard. It was a human bone.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
And I advised him at that point that he was under arrest for murder.
Defeated, Gacy looked straight at Hackmeister and said, "Dave, I'm ready to clear the air." He then confessed to the murder of more than 30 young men and boys.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
The specifics Gacy provided of torture in his house were staggering.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
He talked in detail about sexually abusing the boys and strangling them. As Gacy talked, the officers looked for some feeling in him, some emotion about what he had done. There was none.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
By midday, the first body bag emerged. The crew pressed on. A second body was carried out shortly after. On that first day, a ritual was established that would last as long as the digging continued. Each afternoon, Dr. Stein would report the discoveries of the day.
In the garage, there was just one skeletalized remain, and in the house itself also a skeletalized remain.
No one knew how many bodies would eventually be found, but based on Gacy's confession, officials speculated that the number would be considerable.
When this whole thing is over, you might be witnessing one of the most horrible crimes, perhaps, in a century.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
I'm a foreign correspondent on enemy lines, and I try to let everyone back here in Minnesota know exactly the nefarious activities that are taking place in Washington. I want people in Minnesota armed and dangerous on this issue.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
Of the energy tax, because we need to fight back. Thomas Jefferson told us having a revolution every now and then is a good thing, and the people, we the people are going to have to fight back hard if we're not going to lose our country.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
Now, could you imagine Jim Clyburn talking like that? In my opinion, when a congresswoman tells her constituents to be armed and dangerous, this isn't rhetoric. That's a call to action.
That's the kind of spirit that I have too.
She is advocating of behavior. During the midterm campaign, Sarah Palin's Political Action Committee put these crosshairs over Democratic districts, including that of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. You don't need my thoughts on that, do you? Just listen to what Congresswoman Giffords said about herself.
We really need to realize that the rhetoric and firing people up and, you know, even, for example, we're on Sarah Palin's targeted list, but the thing is that the way that she has it depicted has the crosshairs of a gun sight over our district. And when people do that, they've got to realize there's consequences to that action.
Now,
Don't retreat. Be armed and dangerous on this issue. Revolution. The distortion on the right has been widely out of control, in my opinion. The president has been painted as a Nazi, a socialist, a dictator, and even a terrorist. The right wing has been telling people that they're under physical threat from government takeovers. And they're going to pull the plug on grandma. Where does it end? Could it end in violence and tragedy? That's what every political leader should be asking themselves. Words do have consequences. A lot of people in this country are hurting right now. They're angry because their jobs are going overseas. And it's, I guess you could say it's an undercurrent of anger in America that we all need to be responsible for. And this is what set it off.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
Not in any way, shape, or form. It's my feeling that his personality is the type that is susceptible to this kind of behavior. It doesn't surprise me that people from the right would be upset that people like myself and maybe people from the left and a whole lot of other people in America feel as I do, that the anger that's purposely generated by people who make a living off of it serves one particular party better than the others. And it wouldn't surprise me if it continues at least through 2012.
I regret that you just made it so political in a way, Sheriff, but I also say, and I think that I'll hear negative vibes from the vast majority of my audience tonight, that since this kid was obviously conscious of this congresswoman going back to his encounter with her in 2007, that people...
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
...existed around her re-election campaign and some of the other things that were going on are in denial to suggest that those...
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
We're running out of rich people in this country.
Yeah, we are running out of rich people.
I find it interesting that it was back in the 1970s that the swine flu broke out then under another Democrat president, Jimmy Carter, and I'm not blaming this on President Obama. I just think it's an interesting coincidence.
And that would be an interesting coincidence, except swine flu happened in 1976, and the president at the time was a Republican president.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
That has their beliefs, and they gave Patty Wetterling money. How do you get from point A, where contributing to Patty Wetterling's campaign, to she wants to sit down with Osama bin Laden? I agree that if Patty's the better self to debate, but that's what we should do. I'm sorry, Michelle, but you're making that up.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
Carbon dioxide is portrayed as harmful, but there isn't even one study that can be produced that shows that carbon dioxide is a harmful gas. It is a harmless gas.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
We've moved into the realm of gangster government. We have gangster government.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
When you see the administration appoint czars, car czars, wage czars, there's over 20 czars that have been appointed. Now have an imperial presidency where the president has appointed various czars, appointing directly to him.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
Not all cultures are equal. Not all values are equal.
Only in France could you have suburban youth rioting because the welfare benefits aren't generous enough. And that's what they're telling us. Now, multicultural diversity says out of one, many. And if we go with tribalism, we will not long be one nation united under God.
That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.
I think everyone in the country has been happy about what I said.
On any given day, Congresswoman Michele Bachmann's office gets its fair share of complaints. But to Bachmann, it's a sign she's doing a good job.
I may not always get my words right. I'm Michele Bachmann, and I approve this message. That's just the kind of spirit that I have too. That's just the kind of spirit that I have too.